And we are live. What's going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Tuesday, January 9th. I had to look at the calendar. It is time for season 3 of the Men's Circle. We got somebody who's literally in the circle loading in. I don't know if y'all see. Literally in the circle loading in. But man, before we even get started, I want to welcome everybody back to the Men's Circle. There's just been so much that has taken place over the past 2 months that we've been offline. You start to feel like, dang, I really need a Men's Circle to get this thing going. So I'm glad that you guys are all back. For those who are able to tune in live, glad you guys can jump in with us live. Tap in, say where you're coming from so we know who you are in the chat. Especially, we want to make sure this season of Men's Circle is very interactive. So as such, let's jump straight into this thing. For those who don't know what the Men's Circle is, really the Men's Circle is about having real conversations with real men about real topics, things that are impacting us as men. There's a lot of things where, I mean, you can go out on social media, you can get information from your friends, you can get information on social media where women are telling you how to be a man and all these different things. But this is a place where we can come and we can have conversation, both transparency, honesty, and accountability. So that's what the Men's Circle is about. We're about to jump into this thing. Let's get it going. Tonight's topic is silent suffering. And I need to see, I told you when you get back, it's always a thing trying to click things in. As always, I like to share what I mean by my topics on silent suffering. But before I do that, I want the gentlemen that are here, and eventually when my cousin Brian gets in, I'll have him introduce himself as well. But I don't think any faces are new if you've been paying attention to season 1 and season 2. But go ahead and take a moment to introduce yourself. Brother Bruce, you came in first. Go ahead and rock it.
All right, good afternoon. No, not afternoon. Good evening, all. My name is Bruce Gatewood. I have been a longtime brother of Billy. We go way back, I think middle school, junior high. Yeah, junior high, is that what it's called? I am just absolutely beyond. I mean, I don't even have words for how excited I am that we are back doing this. This has become such a vital part of recharging my batteries to face all the struggles that we face. We talk about a myriad of topics and we get perspective of things that we're going through and experiences that we've had, and we share that, and it helps me grow. So I don't even know what to say. I'm just happy to be back. Straight up.
Billy, you're on mute.
My bad. I was saying, John, you're up next. I unmuted you, didn't unmute myself. I told you.
That's good.
Hey,
that's good.
Y'all gonna have to bear with these technical difficulties for the night.
Well, first of all, I will definitely like to say thank you, Billy, for sending the invite to me again. I definitely appreciate being here, seeing Bruce, seeing Glenn, just meeting everyone else at the conference. That was such a special experience. So again, my name is John Yang. I've known Billy for a long time, and I'm glad to be here. So glad.
Appreciate you. Brother Glenn, you are up next. You're unmuted.
Appreciate it. Season 3 of the First Row. Now, my name is Glenn Davis. I'm out here in Northern California, originally from Philly. I'm just grateful to be back, to be invited back to season 3 of the Men's Circle. There's been a lot of value that's been shared on this, on this call, which is why I continue to come back. But that doesn't, that doesn't surprise me, because anything that Billy has his hands involved in, is it's about value, period, right? And so I'm just grateful to have a voice on the platform. I definitely look forward to tonight's topic. You know, I always come in with one overall goal, that's just to provide value, and the counter piece to that is just to receive value as well. So I'm in the right room, so look forward to talking with y'all.
Yeah, let's make that happen. It's funny to hear you say season 3. I think out of everybody here, because you and I had those inaugural conversations, right, about how we wanted the men's circle to be and what the vision was. And so to be like on season 3 of it, when before it was just like a conversation, it's wild. And it's also been interesting to see season 3 of the men's circle come out, knowing that I've like intentionally shut down other first row content to focus on this. And I mean, I had people, wait a minute, but what about, and how about, and what about us, and how about them? And it was just like, you know, I try to go where God leads me to go. And I know that I have a heart for people, but I have a very specific heart for men, because I know the things that I've gone through. I've known the struggles that I've gone through, where it's felt like I've gone through them alone, and really it was just me and God in the midst. Like that was it. So it's interesting to hear you say season 3, because when you're having the initial conversation, sometimes people talk about things and then they don't execute. Not necessarily a habit of mine, but it's really good to know that there's a continuation and there's still a need for this. Hold on really quick. We got Brother Key jumping in. Brother Key, you are right on time. We just got done doing introductions, but go ahead and take a moment to introduce yourself.
Cool. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. All right. Yeah, Key Bryant, been a part of First Row, I guess, since the inception, and even the beginning at the barbershop when it was in person. Always a pleasure to be on board. Good to see my brothers here, Glenn, Bruce, John, of course, Billy, and also real estate man. So here in the Sacramento area, and just looking forward to getting on this topic.
You're muted, Billy. You're muted.
So as I was saying, tonight's topic is silent suffering. And always I like to share what the topic means to me. But before I share what it means to me, anybody can jump in. We're going to do free for all tonight. We're not going to go in order. Anybody can jump in. What does this topic mean to you?
You're muted, John. If you're talking, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Billy. Hey, let me start it off. You know, for silent suffering, I would say that is very like a very real topic, you know, because, you know, for me, I would say it's hard to talk about it. You know, it's hard to say that, hey, you know, I'm struggling, especially as a man. You know, it's to say that I'm struggling and to say that I need help, you know. So, you know, just finding the group of men here and, you know, in places, other places too, it gives that light. It gives that light because for a big part, I mean, for a huge part, it feels like I was alone. So, you know, like, I don't think anybody wants to be alone. I mean, yeah, you can have your alone time, but man, it's lonely. It gets to be lonely. So, so my biggest part is you don't have to be alone on this. There's other folks who have gone through it. There's folks who are dealing with it, and then there's folks who's unfortunately will gonna have to go through it. So, it's good to have these type of conversations.
I think for me, like when I think about the topic silent suffering, a couple different thoughts come to mind, but I think the most prevailing thought for me would be like, imagine yourself in a room full of people, your loved ones, and they can all talk and they don't have a problem talking, and you can hear them and you're smiling and you're interacting, you're engaging. But when you go to talk, nothing comes out, right? And so on the outside, it doesn't look like anything's wrong with you. On the outside, it looks like you're engaging, you're going along with it, everything's fine. But in reality, on the inside, you aren't. You might be talking, but you're not saying what it is you're going through. And I know I suffer from that. Like 2023 was rough. It was really rough. And so I think the other part of it that silent suffering makes me also think about coming out of 2023 and learning as I went through it, I think that silent suffering is my way of isolating myself when I don't have to, right? So because now I know that there is a tribe, you know, we all have our tribe. Sometimes you got to go through a lot to figure it out. And I like to say your people show up on your darkest days. But once you realize who your tribe is, then it becomes more apparent that I'm suffering in silence because of my own doing, because of my unwillingness to speak up. And that is something that I'm taking with me into 2024. And that's something that I'm really going to really focus in, lean in on. If I'm struggling, I'm letting the people that are rocking with me know, because when we're struggling, when my days are darkest, the worst feeling is that feeling of alone. And again, I liken it to being in a room full of people that you can hear, but they can't hear you. So I just want to make sure that I'm not creating that environment on my own. Like
that you're not promoting that environment for yourself.
Right.
I'm with that. Glenn or Key?
Yeah, I was just about to say, man, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I think that number one of the reasons why I like this particular topic is because this is yet another topic that men generally don't have, right? When talking about, you know, what does it mean to you? Like, you know, what are some practical principles of how to get through it? And I think, Bruce, what you saying, you know, like recognizing that you're not going to, if you get to that point, you're not going to just stay there. Like you'll reach out to you're going to lean into your friends, right? Or the people that you can actually trust. And I think that that's something that's key. As I was kind of thinking about the questions of, like, it's a sad reality because many men, many individuals, but specifically many men, you know, feel like they have to, you know, stuff everything, right? In dealing with life, even when they have a trusted circle. And I think that's hopefully some of the viewers, you know, if that is in fact the case, to realize or think back to, like, hey, you created that circle for a reason, right? Whether you're spiritual and, you know, God placed those individuals in your life for a reason, like those individuals are there for a reason. So when you find yourself in those darkest days of not trying to stuff so much, you know, inside, but lean in or lean to the left or lean to the right, to the folks in your circle, man, I think that that's very key. That's something that I would say it's unfortunate that it's a reality. And I hope that more people create a circle or lean into their circle, so that they don't feel like they have to be in that storm alone.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah. So what this topic means to me is, I think of silent suffering in a way of a man's duty, and I think that that's the definition a lot of us were brought up in, is that it's our duty to suffer in silence, because there's a preconceived notion of what's feminine and what's masculine, and sometimes the thought is, oh, okay, a feminine person is going to, not meaning that, you know, when I say feminine, I'm talking about feminine characteristics, right? Someone that is always talking, expressing their emotions. They're always up and down. They just say everything that comes to their mind. And then there's this preconceived notion that as a masculine person or individual, you keep those things to yourself. You have that process. You're talking with yourself through it and not putting everyone else through your emotional battle, right? And then when you get to the place where you finally found a resolution on your own, then you can present those topics in a calm manner, right? So silent suffering to me, I think of it in that sense. I also think that it's not a healthy way of doing it as well. I just think that that's just a way that I want to say, I can't say all, but I want to say majority of men think that's what it is to be a man, to be this one that is just, you know what, the family doesn't know that I'm going through all this drama, that I'm going through this, but I show up every day with a smile on my face and making sure, you know, things are provided for and all of this, and, you know, and so forth. And that's that suffering that I think a lot of men go through. And I think, you know, it could be what some women go through too, but for the most part, yeah, I think that's where my thought process goes.
No, I really like that thought process because it immediately hits me with we are perpetuating a cycle of, and I think about the conversations I was having last year with my oldest son, Ezekiel, and some of those moments where I was, internalizing and just getting us through the moment. He sees that as my dad is invincible, right? And then he gets to his struggles as a young male trying to grow into a man. He gets into his struggles, and it's like, I don't know, everything's just falling apart, and I don't even know what to do. And when all I've given him is an example of, I'm going to hold it all inside, and I'm going to deliver, and I'm going to execute, and I'm going to execute, and I'm going to execute. He's thinking, what kind of weak dude am I? Because my dad was able to do this with one hand tied behind his back, right? So that is something I definitely want to talk about a little bit later. When I think about this particular topic, I immediately go to the movie Get Out, and I think about the sunken place. The sunken place being, if you haven't seen Get Out, if I'm here right now and I go into the sunken place, I can still see everything that's going on. I can still hear everything that's going on. Hey, cousin Brian. I can see everything going on, hear everything that's going on, but I'm unable to get that outward communication. I'm unable to say, hey, I'm Billy. I'm unable to say, help, I need help, or anything like that, because I'm just in the background. And often when I think about suffering in silence, really when I think about the moments where I've suffered in silence, it's been me in the background, like the person who's doing the day-to-day, going to work, getting up in the morning, even going to the gym or whatever it is in my routine. That stuff is all autopilot. It's not me outwardly there. I'm in my head. I might be doing 16 or 15 bench presses under some weight, but in my head, I'm contemplating what I'm struggling with, and I'm just happen to be automatically keeping count to 15. So when I think about this particular topic, the silent suffering, I think about falling into that sunken place and kind of being kind of having my voice stolen outwardly, because the voice keeps going internally. It's bouncing all over the place inside, but it's not really getting out to the people who may need to hear it. I struggle with this particularly a lot with my wife, where I just kind of get into this place where I just begin to shut down and I just take a step back. And then it's just me and quietness in my head and my suffering and my plight. And she will try to come to me and say, what is it that's going on with you? Talk to me. And it's just like, I'm so conditioned. It's hard for me to, as articulate as I am, to come up with the words. All I can get out typically is something's wrong. Something's wrong. That's all I can get out. But I can't get like, something is wrong and this is what the something is. How can we work together to get that resolved? That part is I feel like where the suffering takes place, because even though I can say something is wrong, I'm still trying to process what that something is, and I can feel it, but I can't articulate it. So that's what this topic means to me when I think about silent suffering. Cousin Brian, go ahead and introduce yourself and then share what the topic means to you.
Of course, again, I'm Billy's cousin, Brian, Uncle Brian himself. But I mean, it's funny, Billy. You talk about this topic and you say that you can't articulate why you're in that space, right? And I'm just the opposite. I can articulate why I'm suffering in silence. My issue is this, I communicate that, it's just not getting through, right? And I communicate it over and over and over again. I'm pretty good at communicating how I feel. But when I feel like I'm not, I have to always be right. And I don't have to always get in my way, but at least let's have a conversation about it, right? And when that conversation doesn't happen, that's when I fall back into my, my suffering in silence, basically. And I know what my triggers are. And I know when I look at, And the kids know. If dad's not talking, there's a problem, right? And that's my way of dealing with it, because I don't want to get to a place where I'm having an adverse impact on other folks. But this is a very good topic, because when you talk about men suffering in silence, oftentimes what I tell myself is, this is just how we are. This is how we do it. This is what we do. And never have I said, this isn't right. How can I correct it? What do I need to do to prevent myself from suffering in silence, right? We just get used to the things that, because this is just what men do, right? We just get used to it. And that's why I like the men's circles, because it opens up conversations about how we can get out of spaces that we live in, and we become normalized in those spaces, even though those spaces are unhealthy.
Right. Even though we know they're not normal. I love that.
Brian, you hit on way this boy. I'm so happy to be back. You hit on so many things. So I do know my triggers, and I too feel like I'm suffering in silence, because I agree. You ain't got to do it my way. You ain't got to agree. We got to have that communication. My problem is, once we've had that communication, once, twice, 3 times a lady, once we've had that conversation 3-4 times, now my suffering in silence is because I know you've heard me. I know I've expressed myself, and no action is being taken. And so then you said, so there goes Bruce suffering in silence. Then you said about, oh man, Brian, you killed it. Then it's when now I'm in silence and we're not taking the steps to correct it. What do I got to do to correct it? Because what we normally do is we just take it. Damn, even in the fix of the suffering in silence, in some instance, as a man, I still am just going to have to take it, right? Because if you don't change, but I keep on reacting to the fact that you're not changing, I'm not changing either. So in some space, I got to suck it up and deal with it. And that is crazy to me. That's Brian, you just blew me away, bro.
3 times a lady. I love it. Really quick, I'm going to bring in from the live chat. Tyler says, I agree. Many men believe silent suffering is what we must do. The old deceptions of men, the silent, strong gunslinger, soldier, etc. Man's man. What is strange is in the military, everything is done as a unit, a group. To execute the mission, the team must work together in an efficient way. There is no Rambo, a true story. Success as a lone wolf is a myth. It's important that we end suffering alone and reach out when we need it. Learn the communication skills needed to at least speak to someone. I love that. Thanks, Tyler, for chiming in.
That's my brother Tyler, by the way. I just want to shout out my brother Tyler. Thank you, Tyler, for joining us. That's my guy.
Yeah.
Like, we all play video games and stuff. That's my brother I've never met. Ain't never seen this man in my life. And I've known him for years. And that's really my brother. Shout out to you, Tyler, for joining us.
I love that. It's interesting when he talks about the unit, because often people think, oh, I'm going to just do it on my own. And that's, I think, what silent suffering really is. It's, okay, going back to what you said, Bruce, I'm tired of reacting to this situation. So I'm going to fix it for myself. And by fixing it for myself, that means I'm no longer going to be reactive to the situation. That's the first part of the fix, which means I now have to numb myself to that reaction, which means all the emotional turmoil is now within inside of me, and I won't let that out, because that says that I'm reacting to it. There is no lone wolf solution. I love that Tyler said that. There is no lone wolf solution when you're suffering. When you're suffering, like, remove the silent from it, right? And just go into suffering. When you're suffering, you typically are in an emergency, and you will probably be taken to a medical facility to get repaired. Yet, when we are in a space of silent suffering, we think that we can suffer and somehow take care of it ourselves. Like, it's like being on the operating table, and you're the doctor you're the surgeon talking about scalpel. That ain't gonna work. You ain't gonna be able to do your own open heart surgery. So when we think about suffering in and of itself, it is typically a team effort to repair the suffering. So when we're silent about it, and when we don't project it and we don't continue to hold people accountable, we're in essence giving up on I'm going to say a better situation. We're giving up on a better situation and just taking the easy way out. Well, I'll just suffer every time they show up. I'll just suffer every time they do this and it triggers me. I'll just suffer silently. But you're giving up on the better situation of it. What and how do I have to communicate in order to avoid this situation happening again? Even this past week, my wife and I, we've been struggling with some communication things, and it just got to the point where I was like, hey, here's one of my notebook journals. I need you to write this down. I need you to write down what it is you're asking for asking for me. I need you to write it down so I can see it. That way I can hold myself accountable to it. And if it continues to trigger you outside of these things, then we can have a discussion on if we need to add more stuff or if I just can't add all these things. Like, it was a space where before, even for me, I was just like, I'm gonna just shut down. I'm gonna just be silent. I'm gonna just shut down and let it go. But it was like, does that fix the problem? And this is what I love about the men's circle and the topics. It's like, you can't go into a week with the men's circle on a silent suffering week, right? And then in that same week, be like, I'm gonna suffer in silence anyway. That does not work. Hey, what's going on, Casual? Really quick. So I want to bring into because I feel like we're talking around it, but I want to ask the specific question, and anybody can jump in. What does silent suffering look like to you? Because I know what it looks like to me, but what does it look like to you when you're experiencing silent suffering, or you're in an episode of silent suffering?
I'll go. For me, it's almost like Jekyll and Hyde. It's like two personalities battling each other back and forth, because it's something that you're trying to deal with, and at the same time trying to find an answer for that you don't necessarily know if you have the right answer. And for me, growing up, it's always been, it didn't come up in an environment where it was like, you can ask questions, or, for religion, it was like, don't question God, like that whole type of theme. And then it was like, do as I say, not as I do, and do as I tell you, and don't respond back. Basically, don't ask me questions why. It's because I told you so. So growing up in that, it was always like, okay, I just got to keep things to myself because no one wants to hear me. Right. So that battle has always been when there's an issue or a problem that comes up and it sounds like someone's not receiving what I'm trying to convey, then it's removing myself and saying, okay, now I got to figure this thing out on my own. Right. Now I got to figure out what the right answer is. And maybe I have to even compromise my own self of things that I want to do or the way that I feel things should be done. So now I got to compromise that to make someone else happy or satisfied. But I have to come to that realization on my own. So it's almost like it's a warfare. It's like I got to find this new person that can compromise with this other person that feels, something isn't right.
That brings up a question for me, is how much of silent suffering is really a byproduct of self-soothing? Because I remember being that kid. Your parents tell you can't go to the party, or you can't go outside and play, you can't do whatever it is that you want to do, and you go in your room, you're like, right? You throwing He-Man around the room and stuff, right? You're mad, but you realize you can't vocalize that frustration because you're a child. And that's a really great place to practice that, where you can't vocalize your frustration as a child. And then after 18 years of being a child, all of a sudden on year 18, you're supposed to miraculously like, okay, now I can speak my mind. Now I can vent and vocalize frustration when you've had 17 years and 11 months of no practice doing that. So I think that's a great thing. Anybody else on what does silent suffer look like for them?
I'll go. So silent suffering for me has evolved. And it's rarely about frustration, right? One of my worst qualities is how easy it is for me to let you know I'm frustrated, right? Like I'll go there, you know what I mean? But for me, like 2023 it was so crazy how I was suffering in silence, but like I was trying to be out loud, right? So here's an example. Like when the suicide attempt happened, 2 days after that, I went and got a therapist. And I started talking to people about the fact that I got a therapist. And then I talked to my therapist, and then I talked to people about, but no one ever asked me, like, Bruce, why did you need a therapist? You know what I'm saying? No. And when I tell people that 2023 was the worst year of my life, mentally, no one, like most of my people, they don't believe it because outwardly seeing me move, thriving, like, man, on it looks better than it feels sometimes, right? Like on the outside, we're doing good, woo, 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 but on the inside, I'm dying, right? To the point where people would call me and express their problems, and I'm helping them through their situations, but they don't know that I'm so. Silent suffering used to be, like you said, storming off to your room, but it evolved into some. One of you guys said autopilot. I lived all of 2023 on autopilot. The entire year. I mean, in and out and through the motions, but on the days that were the darkest, the signs were all there. And it was crazy. Like, so for me, what silent suffering looks like, it looks completely normal. And you don't even know you're looking at it, right? That's why it's a silent killer, right? Like you'll hear about people who commit suicide or suffering the deepest of depression. You're like, I don't even know. He seems so happy. He seems so this, that, and the third. Silent suffering is a chameleon, man. It's, I don't know. I don't even know what it looks like to me anymore. You know what I mean? But I know what it feels like. And because I know what it feels like, I know that it's my responsibility to speak up and speak out type situation.
I love that. Glenn, what you got?
Hey, Bruce, I got a question for you because there's a lot of men who are in the dark, right? And their perspective or their view on a therapist is very so for example, so I'm from Philly, right? Inner city kid. When it came to like therapy wasn't a thing, right? As far as like a topic, like, yep, if you feel like as a man or as a kid or as a whatever in your community, that wasn't the solution. The therapist was more so kind of looked upon, right? Or frowned upon. And so now obviously living life and kind of experience, my perspective on a therapist is different. So for you kind of going through your phase in 2023, what advice would you give other men, or, you know, what made you even go seek to get a therapist, like to get over that hump?
That's a great question. Okay. So a couple things. I'm wired a little different. Tim gave me a compliment talking about he likes how I can come on here and be vulnerable. Woo, woo. That's always been me. I don't have a problem speaking my desires, my flaws. I talk, man. And I think it's a byproduct of being on my own at 15 and trying to get adults to believe that I need the things that I need. Well, go get your daddy, go get your mama. No. It's me. And I need y'all to help me figure out how to get it. So I've been just an open book in terms of talking. But what drove me to therapy was when you want to harm yourself for real, like if to anybody listening, if you ever really want to harm yourself and you take the actions to harm yourself, you should definitely seek to speak to a professional, right? And that scared me, right? Like that was the trigger for me. Like, I really want to be here, but in that moment, I didn't want to be here. And I'm going to need somebody to help me figure out how to prevent that from happening again. So, and my brother Scott, shout out to my brother Scott, he had been talking to me about therapy as well. Because you're right. I'm from California. You're from Philly. We're all men. We ain't talking, bro. Man up. Pull your pants up. rub some dirt on it. We all those things that we're told. So that's a real thing. But my brother being very open with me and telling me about his therapist and his sessions and shit, actually got the ball rolling. And I mean, he had talked to me about that way before my episode. But it was something that stuck out in my mind and I remembered it. And actually, funny enough, he ended up referring me to his therapist because this is the advice I would give you. My first therapist told me she didn't want me to cuss. Now, I slip a word here and there, but I'm not there's other English words and I know how to use them. But the fact that she told me she didn't want me to cuss made me feel like that would be restrictive. Like, how can I be who I am and how can I receive help from you if you're already putting restrictions on our conversations? So after telling my brother that, he was like, nah, check out Dr. Greer, woo woo. So I would tell anybody who's looking into therapy, do your research, make sure your therapist is a fit. There's no one size fits all, right? We're all different individuals. We all have different individual needs. And don't be afraid to talk to anybody that you know loves you about the fact that you are thinking about therapy, because people who actually love you will tell you how great of an idea that is, even if they don't have a therapist themselves, right? Anytime you want to help yourself, everybody in your corner should be pushing you to do that. I hope that answered your question, Glenn. That's a great question.
Wonderful, wonderful question. Really quick, I want to bring in from the comments. Tyler says what it looks like. It looks like silent resentment, one-word answers, and avoiding contact from others for me. Yep, it's a reclusive event. You shut off everything, and I've been there where I've literally, my phone has gone on silent for weeks. Like, if I happen to look at the phone and I see that somebody's calling, I'll answer if I want to talk to them. If I don't, I'll see you when I see you, and I'll talk to you when I talk to you. For me, I've always said that, and I think I put a post up on this recently. I have this gauge, and the gauge really has like temper tantrum and silent suffering. Like, that's the gauge, and in between is the sweet spot. But the gauge is temper tantrum, silent suffering, and when I find myself lashing out or yelling out of frustration or being unreasonable in arguments, that's when I know my spectrum or my gauge is leaning more towards temper tantrum. When I find myself immediately shutting down, like, it could just be like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm not in the mood to figure that out. And I just immediately shut down. Well, get whatever you want. And I just actually had somebody this past week recently tell me, they were like, hey, when you have this conversation with this person, I don't want you to just simply give in to what they want, because you're a person who values your peace. And I think that's sometimes where we as men go for silent suffering, is because it's something we can control. Silent suffering looks like like control. It's not control, but it looks like control. And so it gives us a sense of peace, because now I don't have to engage with your drama. I don't have to engage with your attitude. I don't have to engage with your negativity. Unfortunately, the look, going back to what you said, Bruce, that normal look of what peace may look like is like a house with dry rot. Yeah, you got a structure standing. The house is gorgeous on the outside. But when you get to the inside and they do that inspection, they're like, yo, you got termites. Your house is all of 5 minutes away from the roof falling in on it. So I love that, but it looks normal, but at the end of the day, we're not getting that normal peace. We're not getting I forget the word, but we're not getting a sustainable version of peace. We're getting a temporal version of peace that is going to come with an immediate consequence to follow after. Anybody else?
Yeah. Hey, Billy, I would definitely want to add to that. You mentioned peace. I think that's a big part. For me, for silent suffering, I mean, the obvious part is when you stop using your voice. You stop being true to yourself, your authenticity. And, looking back, like for me, like as my childhood, my upbringing, I'm Asian American, I'm a middle child. I've always been whatever my father said, whatever the older sibling said, like like I never really had a voice. Not that it was necessarily shut down, but I just never used my voice. And then I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it until just recently that I wasn't being me. Although on paper it looked like I was great. I did well in school, great job. But like how you said peace, it wasn't on it wasn't on here. So I'm 42. I'm 42. And basically 2-3 years ago, it blew up. It blew up in my face. Because and that's why, just looking back, like, man, all these time, it may not have been directly, but my voice, for whatever reason, I didn't use my voice. So it's key that you use your voice, you set your boundaries. Like, hey, like this is where I'm comfortable being John.
I love that, setting the boundaries. Yeah, because silent suffering does not set boundaries. It actually encourages poor behavior, because if somebody is interacting with you in a way that is overstepping your boundaries, we're going to call them habitual line steppers. If somebody's a habitual line stepper, overstepping your boundaries, and you're never saying anything to correct them, you're normalizing that for them. And they're like, oh, they're cool with it. I had a person I was dating years and years and years ago. And it was really interesting because this was an African-American woman. And when I met this woman, I was told she wasn't attracted to African-American men. They were like, she don't date African-American men. And then the person said, well, you haven't met Billy. And then we started dating. And she had this friend. She had this best friend. It was a white best friend that she had. And her best friend would say some wild things. I mean, wild. And she was like, I just don't understand why she would say that. I said, well, have you ever said anything to her about what she's saying? Well, no, she's my friend. She probably doesn't really mean it. And I was like, well, that's why she thinks it's okay. You've never done anything to correct it. And the same advice that I would give her is the same advice I would give men about being in a silent suffering situation. A person who you've never corrected, even if you have corrected them, once you stop correcting them, once you stop saying, no, this is the boundary, they say, okay, maybe that boundary fell down and now they're accepting me for who I am. Well, no, that boundary's still up. And every time you go over it, I'm getting a red alert that somebody has trespassed past the boundary, but I'm not sounding that red alert so the intruder doesn't know that they've been detected. So that's what I got. Cousin Brian, you came off mute. I didn't know if you had something.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what silent suffering looks like is isolation. Like unlike John, I have a voice. I love peace, but if I use that voice, there's not going to be any peace, none. And so isolation is my way to, just keep from having how I feel impact others, right? Now, in terms of what silent suffering feels like, I mean, I get frustrated, upset, angry, the whole nine. But I think part of what my problems in dealing with and handling it better is that when I am isolated and I'm in that space, I try to first understand if I'm being reasonable. Is it me or is it, my wife or whatever the case may be? But I think sometimes what I do is I find myself being unreasonable when I know I'm reasonable. So I'm making an excuse for my own suffering and isolation, right? Instead of confronting the issue head on and saying, look, no, I'm right, you're wrong. And then another thing is, and Billy, we talked about this earlier in the week, is that once I get out of that space, that isolation space, I don't circle back and have that conversation to make sure I'm not in that space again for the exact same reason. And that's on me too, because I don't circle back and look, this is why, honey, this is why I was away for a couple of hours, wasn't talking to anybody. This is how I'm feeling. And that's on me too. So part of me suffering in silence is on me. I haven't addressed it in a way to prevent it from happening down the road.
No, and I love that, the isolate. I think the only thing for me that I'm learning, and when my wife and I have been in marriage counseling, the accountability aspect is typically I will just isolate, like I will ghost to disappear. there's a communication aspect that takes place. Hey, like my wife asked me the other day, hey, baby, is everything okay? I'm frustrated. We'll talk about it later. At least giving the, hey, this is the emotion that I'm in right now. But then that follow-up is coming back around and talking about it later. Because if I just disappear and every time my wife comes into my office and she's, babe, do you want something to eat? No, I'm not hungry. And now I have an attitude and I'm giving off that energy, right? Because I didn't communicate that I was intentionally isolating for a reason. It's hard though, because for me, I'm quite comfortable just poof, disappearing. um, and being isolated for the entire day. But that is unfair to the other people because you still create a disturbance, right? If the purpose of isolation is so that I'm not creating this energy around, not letting the energy that's in me seep out into the energy of others. If that's the purpose of isolation, it's almost like if you when we were all in our dating phase, right? And you get your girl calls you and she says, hey, we need to talk. Or she texts you and says, we need to talk. You're like, oh shit, what did I do? Like you go through this anxiety of all the possible things that you could have done. And if you were anything like me, you had a million possibilities that you had to go through. All these things that you have possibly done. Whereas if she says, hey, we need to talk a little bit later about what we're going to do for traveling this upcoming year, all the anxiety is gone. And in the same aspect, if we have that same approach with silent suffering, or when we're choosing to isolate, because I don't think isolation is a bad thing. I think extended isolation is a bad thing. But temporary isolation is not a bad thing. But if we can communicate in the beginning of that temporary isolation, hey, I'm going to take about 2 hours just to kind of veg out on me. I'll just play a video game that I don't even really care about. And it will give me that space to let my mind clear and calm down a little bit so that I can get to a space where I can talk with myself before I talk with my partner or with whoever I need to speak with. Somebody else was off mute, but maybe they went back on mute. With that, I'm going to move on to the next one. So, Bruce, you kind of touched on this when you were talking about what the topic means to you, but what are some of the triggers or what triggers your cycles of silent suffering? Because I believe that it's a cycle. I don't believe it's like this linear path. Oh, I suffered in silence once, and now I will not suffer in silence because for that reason ever again. I think sometimes it's the same reason that just hits at different times in the timeline.
I mean, for me personally, it's always communication based. And so since I'm not, no one's perfect at anything, perfection's an illusion, right? I feel like I communicate well, but I understand that with every relationship, regardless if it's a friendship or a work relationship or your spouse, communication is ever growing. It's evolving. You always are learning more and more and how to communicate with people. I just feel like I find myself in my most isolated state of silent suffering, just feeling like I'm not being heard, or it's either a feeling of not being heard, understood, or appreciated, right? It's some combination of those things. And I don't know what triggers them in terms of getting out of it. But I would say that what I've learned is that, and everyone keeps opening their mouth and saying the same thing. I hope y'all are listening. Everyone keeps saying the same thing. The foundation of it all is communication. So I know that finding the words to talk my way out of it is how the cycle ends, is how the clouds part, the sun comes out, we're shining again. I just wish that I could find those words in the beginning to lessen the duration, right? So what triggers your cycles of silent suffering for me would probably be a situation to where I'm communicating, but I'm not being understood, heard, or feeling like what I'm saying matters, right?
Yeah, Key, I'm gonna bring you on since I know you gotta leave in a little bit. What about you? What are your triggers for your silent suffering?
I think that I think it could be fear. At least on my end, it could be the fear of not being able to, like, knowing that you need to bring something out, but not going to be understood or be misunderstood, and have to continue to keep fighting that process, and you'd rather just push it away and deal with it on your own. So I think fear could be a part of it, but I think Bruce hit the nail on the head when he's talking about it's really just about communication. Being able to communicate what it is that you're thinking about, what it is that you have to address with someone else, can really prevent, the silent suffering. And I think it's, like you said earlier, it's the difference between just temporary isolation and long duration of isolation, where it becomes that suffering, right? It's like, I'm sitting here suffering about this, but I'm just going to hold on tight and keep pushing and not let anyone else know. So I think partly of that has to do with the fear of having to actually address it, number one, and then also not communicating it.
I just put this in the chat, and just for all the men, does anybody's cycle start off with really conflict avoidance? Like, at the end of the day, I just don't want to argue about it. I just don't want. It's not even I don't want to talk about it. It's just I don't want to argue about it. If I felt like we could just talk about it, I wouldn't suffer silently. But because I feel like it's going to be an argument, I just, okay, babe. All right, boss.
Yep.
All right, you're right. And I just disengage immediately because I don't want to get into verbal combat. Does anybody else have that trigger cycle?
I used to be like that a lot, Billy. But somewhere along the line, for me personally, the avoidance, like that choose your battle. They always say, pick your battle, choose your battle. So sometimes I'll come across a situation to where, you know what, it's all good, babe. Those have been easier for me to manage in terms of the suffering and silence. The duration that I suffer when I do that is immensely shorter for me than when I actually have the argument and I'm misunderstood, because I said what I said and you heard what you heard. And that always blows me. That blows my mind. So I would say, yep, I have those cycles, but mine, when I avoid, I actually walk away feeling better. Because listen, especially if it's spouse related or children related. I've been with my wife for 21 years on the 29th. My daughter turns 20. My oldest turns 20. My youngest turns 18 this year. I've been doing this for a minute, right? So I know how this interaction could go. There's only one of two ways. I ignore it and my headache is small. I engage and my headache is huge, and it could lead to some silent suffering. So it's one of those pick your battles for me in that situation.
Brian, you said no. What's your cycle? Trying to get you off mute here. I think I can.
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what Bruce be saying. He kind of hit home with a lot of the things he brings up. I would say communication. I mean, Bruce hit the nail on the head with the communication piece. That's my biggest, that's the biggest issue that I have when it comes to suffering in silence. And it's never a situation where I am afraid of the engagement or the possibility of having an argument, right? I'm never, because I try to stay out of that space as much as I can. And my wife is probably the most peaceful person you ever want to meet. But my thing is just the lack of communication. I can do everything myself, but I don't want to. I mean, if that was the case, I wouldn't be married, right? So when I'm having these conversations, and I don't feel like, and I do feel like I'm being heard. Sometimes I feel like I may not be communicating in the right way, and that's when I fall back on, am I being reasonable? Did I communicate this the best way I could without, being demeaning? Because I don't want to demean anyone and assume or talk down to someone. Right? Let's have this adult conversation, about whatever the topic is. But I'm never concerned about a fight or some kind of volatile engagement. My biggest thing is I need feedback. I want feedback. And when I don't get it, that's when I started to get frustrated.
Got it. Bruce, or not Bruce, Glenn, I seen you come off and I see you off as well, John. What you guys got?
Yeah, Billy, I could go here. So for me, I would say it does usually start with avoidance, mainly trying to avoid confrontation, just basically for the idea of to keep things moving forward. But like that has like I've said, like that has not worked out well for me. It actually worked out completely opposite. So the biggest thing for me, I would say, is you really got to, again, what triggers me is that misplace of trust. Because sometimes I find myself, or many times in the past, where I've taken the back seat because I believe that someone was advocating for me. But the best person to advocate for yourself is always yourself. Don't ever think that someone, they might have your back, but don't ever think that they will ever get better for you than yourself. So
Right.
that's my biggest part in terms of I got to use my voice. No one knows me better than myself. So so again, so that's usually my trigger. It's and this is also like not just personal space, is also like professional workplace as well too. Like like where if a boss is like, hey, John, I understand you got a concern, but let's go this way, and then you find out at the end, like the leadership is lacking, the direction is lacking, so it kind of puts you in a place where, like, man, I took a back seat for nothing, and then I became invisible. So it didn't work out.
Right. And you ended up in a destination you wasn't even trying to go to. Glenn, what you got?
Yeah, I would say as of probably the last 7 months, I've tried to practice not suffering in silence, and so I'm gonna come back to that piece of it. My perspective on it was a lot different before, because up until that time, like, I used to just kind of just keep everything inside and then I'll blow up, right? Thankfully, I think that because of the relationship that my wife and I have, and going back to what Bruce said about just communication, I think that has helped someone like me who's grown up in my environment, who has been learned to just stuff things and then explode, or just kind of suffer in silence. Even as a man, I think kind of navigating through that, having my wife as a partner, being able to communicate and even learn, like, not that she taught me, but some of the conversations taught me to kind of be in isolation for that short period of time and really figure out who I was and dive a little bit deeper. Now, I say that as of 7 months ago, my perspective is a little different on this, because I realized that when I look at my circle of people, like, I have I have some very thorough men in my circle. And right. And when I learned to be, so as of 7 months ago, I've learned to be more vulnerable and more transparent with my circle. And if there are really truly people who I call friends, I should be able to tell them anything and everything. Right. And so I realized that, and I've taken more of that friend role. I've taken more ownership with that. And so now I'm in a place where if I'm going through something, I know that I could pick up the phone and call Billy. I know I could pick up the phone and call the people within that I identify who are my friends in my circle, and not have to go through it alone, because I know that it's not healthy. Right now, it took me 30 plus years of navigating through, through all of that. And I'm 42 now, right? So it took me like 39 years, and I feel like I've been practicing the last couple years. But I say all that to say, based off of this particular question, I try to catch the cycle before it even starts. When I feel like, because I know who I am and I know what triggers me, when I feel that trigger, I just pick up the phone, right? And as always, whenever I need to make that phone call, they pick up on the other end, right? And they make the conversation a priority. And I think that because God has blessed me with my circle of folks, it has now helped me to where I don't have to go into that cave, into that dark space of being silent. And I really, over the years, I never had to, because those friends have always been there. I just now recognize their value in the friendship that they bring, and being that listening ear or that sounding board.
I love that.
I'm doing it. I'm sorry. Look at me interrupting. Glenn, you're smashing it on all points. So that's what I learned in 2023. You can't keep on telling all these people they're your brother and they love you and you love them. All that's dead if you can't pick up your phone and say whatever, right? People who love you are going to love you before you say it. They're going to love you after you say it. And if they really love you, they're going to love you even more for you trusting them enough for you to even be able to say it. Now, me and Billy done had some conversations. I've done told Billy some stuff I ain't told, you know what I mean, but 3-4 other people, right? But that's the point. So when I'm at, like you said another one, Glenn, when I feel it, because I know me, man. I don't know you like that, but I know me, and I know the feeling. Before the days get dark, the clouds start rolling in, the wind changes the temperature. We have all these signs, right? And it's the same thing inside of Bruce. So when I feel that shit, pick up the fucking phone, man. And that goes for anybody listening. If you know me and you're my brother, you know you can call me. My problem was in 2023, what I learned is I didn't give you guys the grace for me to pick up my phone and call y'all. But y'all knew y'all could call me. And that ain't nobody's fault but Bruce's, right? So it goes back to communication, man. It goes back, and everybody keeps opening their mouth and saying it. Speaking up, yo. Like, use your brothers, use your circle. If you got the right people rocking with you, then they're resources, infinite resources, right? Not no, I need $20 every day. Let me call Billy. Hey, Billy, let me get another $20. No, a mental, a spiritual, a resource, right? And we all have them. We all have them. If you've been rocking with the right people, if you're keeping the right people in your circle, you have resources. But it's really, really up to us as men to kick all that other extra shit and use the resource. When you don't know, you Google. You don't question it. You just Google it, right? It should be the same thing, right? It should be the same thing when you're reaching out to your brothers. I love it, Glenn. I love it. You did all that.
I love it. I'm going to bring in really quick from the chat. Big Brother Almighty, author Damian K. Rowe. Unlike how many of our elders dealt with their traumas, failures, and life disappointments, we have to stop trying to act like we never went through nothing. Preach. In order to fully heal, we have to stop trying to convince ourselves that we're okay when in fact we're not. Period. Love it. Tyler came in and said, triggers for me are feeling misunderstood or undervalued. Woo! Hey, undervalued, underappreciated. That is, woo, like it triggered me and ain't nobody even underappreciated me right now. That's a solid one for me right there, Tyler. Having to say the same things or having communicate my needs multiple times, being vulnerable is already hard. So when I have to do it time and time again with a loved one or another, I will just shut down or avoid it because oh man, put the words together. Somehow there we go. The end is not supposed to be there. Somehow that seems easier. Shouldering the struggle silently is at that moment less invasive, or at least that's how it feels. Absolutely. What's going on, Cousin Bobby? Yes, you got to be here for these men's circles, man. They are very awesome. And then lastly, Keone, unmet expectations is a trigger for me. I suffer in silence, but I yell to myself in the car or home alone like a crazy person. Brother Keone, I'm so glad you could chime in with us tonight.
You're not crazy, Brother Keone. We all do that. You are not crazy, brother.
Yeah, and it's whether I'm excited or disappointed, it's the same. One of the triggers as we've been sitting here talking, for me has been loss of control or feeling like I'm being manipulated. Whenever I feel like I am losing control, especially I'm a very strategic person. So when things start shifting and I feel like my control is slipping, or if I feel like somebody's trying to come at me in a way that's trying to manipulate me and control me, then I start to go into like silence in the aspect of it's not me going in silence and like beating myself up, but it's going in silence and looking at like, what are you really doing here? Like, what's your real intentions here? And then what happens is as I allow that to continue to go on, because we're going to keep coming to this word, I'm not communicating like, hey, I feel like you're trying to manipulate me. How easy is it to say those words, right? I feel like you're trying to manipulate me, but when I go silent and I start observing, it's already bouncing through a filter of, I think they're trying to manipulate me. So let me look at everything that is manipulative that they are doing, even if they're not trying to really manipulate me. That's one of my silent suffering triggers, because it engages a different part of my mind that becomes hypercritical and hyper judgmental of the information that's coming to me. There's sometimes my wife will come to me and she'll have an idea or a thought about something that I'm doing. Like let's say she comes to me about the Wednesday word. Oh, did you think about putting this on there? Or did you think about making the logo red for Valentine's Day? I don't know. Whatever it is, she comes and she says, but sometimes my defenses immediately go up like, whoa, are you trying to, I've been doing the first row for like a decade. Are you trying to come in and change it into what you want the first row to be? And I become protective of it and defensive of it. And so it becomes hard. Unfortunately, one of the byproducts of that is it's hard for people to contribute to your success and help evolve something that you're building, when you're so standoffish to receive anything from them, because you feel like it's all coming through a lens of manipulation. So I do want to move on, because man, time is flying tonight. We're gonna skip a question and go with this one. So after we're in our silent suffering, and John, I love that you were talking about the voice, like not having your voice. How do we regain our voice in a productive way? How do we not, Glenn, go from stuffing it to an explosion to regain our voice, right? Because that's how many of us do it. That's why men fight each other, because you're on the basketball court, you had a bad day at work, and now somebody's fouling you and talking about your mama. Now you punching and fighting, right? Because you've been suffering in silence all day. Now about to beat somebody up. So how do we, in a positive or a productive manner, regain our voice when we come out of silent suffering? And even also, Brian, I would love for you to touch on how we do it once we communicated that we're going into isolation and we're going to come out and we're going to communicate. How do we come out of that isolation and communicate in a productive way?
Yeah, for me, I got to stop letting people off the hook, right? Because when I come out of that space, I'm real passive about intentionally not having a conversation to resolve whatever the issue was. Sometimes I just, fall back and say as if nothing ever happened, right? But internally, I'm just waiting for the next episode for me to be up here watching UFC or something with the door locked for a couple of hours, right? And so I know for me to get my voice back, I need to be intentional about circling back with the individual or individuals that the reason why I'm in that space, isolated in that space, and not let them off the hook. Have a conversation, ask the critical questions, even if I feel like I'm being brushed off or the answers are superficial. I need to probe and dig a little bit deeper until I get that resolution to prevent that from happening again. But regaining my voice is just a matter of me being intentional. I mean, I need to have that conversation. I haven't had that conversation. Now, why? I'm not sure. Maybe I don't want to upset someone else, or maybe I don't want to, have someone else, suffer in silence, whatever the case may be. I don't know. But I need to be more intentional about having those discussions once I come out of that suffering space, or I'll be back in it.
Somebody else?
Hey, Billy, I want to add to what Brian said, saying the word intentional. I would say for me, I really got to say like, hey, like I'm right here. Like this is the line right here. This is my boundary. You got to let them know right up front, and then you got to constantly remind to whoever that it's still right here. Because basically you're letting them know that, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with, and this is what I'm not comfortable with. So there's no guessing. So back to that word, Bruce, you said it, communication. You're clearly communicating in terms of what your values are, because the thing is, for me, I always thought I was always a good person. Like, yeah, I made some major mistakes, but I always thought I was a good person. But it's I went to see therapists, multiple therapists. But like, just being part of this is also a therapy in a way too. So, but so that's it's so my point is, you've got to believe in yourself, and you also got to find be resourceful. You got to find the right group, the right resources that can help you succeed.
I love what you said, John. I love what you said. This is definitely therapy. And a shout out to you, Billy, for not charging me $150 for 55 minutes. Because my therapist ain't no joke. My therapist is not playing. He a brother too.
Don't get Billy ideas.
Look, he a brother too. He is not playing. About 53 minutes, he let me know we're going about to wrap this thing up. So I appreciate that. For me, I don't think it's to regain my voice in a productive way. What I'm learning through my wife and my children is, here's my example. I like to say this. I wish I could raise my children over. I wish I could raise them again. I've already been there. I've already done that. I know what I did wrong, right? One of the things that I did wrong is used my voice too much. I used my voice in an unproductive way because that's how we were raised. Or do this, yell, make sure, staying on top of them. Now, they turned out to be great children, right? Turned out to be great children. But like right now, I'm learning about my finances. I'm learning about the stock market. I'm doing all these research and shit. And I'm trying to lean them in that direction. Well, because my voice was so productive when they were younger, ain't nobody trying to hear nothing Dad got to say right now. Dad, we done made it. We know what we need to do. You've done enough yelling. And it's like, damn, but you really need this, right? Like so for me, it's how can I regain their ear in a productive way, right? Just in terms of my silent suffering, right? It's not my voice, because I communicate well, but how do I find a way to communicate to them where they receive the message and action is taken afterwards, right? I think, not to switch the question, but that's just what it brought to me.
No, I actually love that, and I'm actually writing that down. 1 second. Audience. There you go. Got it.
Hey, Billy. I know we still got to go with Glenn, but I just want to interject real quick. I know the question is how, but a big part for me was you got to know the why. Why do you want to regain your voice? Because of course, myself, that's the obvious answer. But I believe everyone here is fathers. But for me, a really big part is my sons, because I realize what I've gone through, what I'm going through, what my dad went through. And seeing my kid, like Bruce, you were just talking about the unproductive way of using your voice. Like I raised my oldest different from how I raised my youngest, because my oldest is like, I didn't know any better. I yelled a lot, and I just apologized to him just recently. I was like, hey, but I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional because I told him I apologize. I didn't know any better. And I know in a level I traumatized. I was never like abusive or anything, but it's like I traumatized. So because now it's like every time when I say something, and then he's like, "Why are you yelling?" I'm like, I'm not even yelling, and I just say, man, I instilled that fear in him, and which is not what I want. Not what I want. So
John,
it's
you're preaching, John. You're preaching.
Yeah.
I constantly, and I implore, first of all, shout out to you, sir. Shout out to you, because it's crazy how we take the stance of I'm the parent. Woo, woo. To apologize to your son should show your son a lot about who you are as a man. But I too, and you said trauma. As parents, we're leaving scars, guys. Now, for me, my biggest thing was not to leave the scars my parents left, but in trying to avoid the scars that my parents left, I left scars because, well, like you said, you were learning. What you knew with your oldest child was different. Like I did all that yelling about you jumping off the bed. Now that you letting the youngest one jump off the bed, bust his head open. Yeah, because I've learned that he gonna be all right. You know, a little blood ain't never hurt nobody. I apologize to my children for the scars I leave them all the time. I tell them all the time I am not perfect, and I always remind them, John, remind yourself. As a parent, most of everything you've done with your child has been a first, unless you got multiple children, right? My kids are only 2 years apart, so the way they were raised wasn't too different because the age range wasn't wide enough. But man, you spoke on it, man. Sometimes you got to apologize for the bullshit your kids are gonna figure it out anyway. They become adults, and then they're like, "Yeah, okay, Dad, I hear you, but you ain't shit." They ain't gonna be able to say that. Okay, it's happening.
Oh, you got to get that smoke detector. Somebody burned it in the kitchen.
They said, "Dad, you ain't going to about to talk about me up on here."
Oh, you over there talking about us, huh? Okay, I'll fix you right now.
Burn this grilled cheese real quick.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate you sharing that, man. I will say to one of those points right there, I think that as men, especially men who are raising men, we have to help change that narrative that as a man, it's okay to apologize, right? And if you're raising men, it's okay to apologize, to your kids, right? I think just as a leader in general, right? And so I just want to say appreciate you sharing that and being transparent, John. On the other side of it, to the question, the being intentional. I think that's it. I think that's the piece of the first step. Like I feel that if you think about whatever got you into that space of feeling that you need to suffer in silence, you have to sit with yourself for a moment. Sit with yourself in silence, right? And think about that. And then I think number two, putting yourself in a therapeutic room could help. And that may be, reaching out for professional help. That may be going to the cigar lounge, cigar lounge. That may be whatever that first step is. But I think in order to get to that first step, you have to sit with yourself in silence and figure out like what got me here, like what triggered me to get to this point. Because just from experience, I feel like when you don't sit with yourself to understand why or what root cause that trigger came from, like you'll never be able to address it and find a solution to that. And I think that the more you do sit with yourself, the more you can find yourself. Okay, cool. As soon as I feel like I'm triggered, I can now go to solution one or solution two, right? Whether that is my circle, whether that is again my therapist, whether it is whatever it is. But I think that those are some of the key things. But I think without that intentionality piece tied to that, you won't be able to regain your voice. But I think that is one step at a time. And I think something that we as men are not as patient with a lot of things. And we don't give ourselves grace. We don't give ourselves enough time to be patient. And I think that is just, it comes with those lessons learned in your intention behind wanting to get better, or even asking yourself, do I want to regain to hear my voice or to have a voice with this particular person or these particular people? Because sometimes you just have to cut off the umbilical cord. Sometimes that energy and that time is not worth continuing to pour into that. And so I think that, again, all of that comes to recognizing the quality of that relationship, the quality of that conversation. And if it's, like I said, worth holding on to. So those are my thoughts on the regaining the voice piece.
No, I love all that.
Glenn, when you say that, when you said the piece about sitting in silence with yourself, it screamed accountability, right? It seemed being accountable to yourself and who you are and what you want, and then being able to regain your voice. And I like that.
Yeah, that's total accountability. Because I recall, like when I was playing basketball when I was younger, that pacified everything, right? Everything that there were situations where I should have sat in silence, Glenn, and just kind of reevaluated things. I'd pick up a ball and I'd be going all day. Wouldn't have a worry in the world, right? By the time I get home, I'm past that moment, right? And so I'm not addressing anything. So I continue to, kind of self-medicate with other activities. As I got older and slowed down, You know, there's a lot of opportunity to find those spaces to really sit with yourself and kind of contemplate and you know, and kind of just evaluate things. So that's a good point. And the beauty of it is, you know, I can have these conversations with my kids now, and they can start this process a lot younger than I did, right? And so the beauty of knowing this now, it's not like it's too late, because I can always pass something down and get them on the right track. Bruce, you were talking about your kids in the stock market, getting them thinking about financial. We didn't have, well, I'll speak for myself. I didn't have a lot of financial mentors growing up, but the things I know now, I can certainly share and have some of the younger generation benefit from some things I wish I could have benefited from when I was a youngster.
Yeah, that's 100%. I'm gonna bring in some of the things from the chat, and then Keone has a question that he's posing to the circle. So first I have Tyler. He says, getting my voice back normally starts with physical labor, thinking, being introspective. This combination of things seems to give me a path to clear communication when I'm in that funk. Goes back to going to play basketball. I used to play basketball 4-6 hours nonstop, just run up and down the court, and you just kind of forget everything that's outside of the basketball court, because you're like, next pass, next block, next steal, next defense, next offense. Like, that's where your mind is. So it's these small little wins that you're engaged with, and it takes your mind off of the big problems that you have. Now I'm not running up and down a basketball court for 6 hours, so that's why I play video games. I don't play sports video games though, because they make me mad. The next one, it looks like Kia is now back in the chat. I think a good approach to regain your voice is to have the mindset that most likely your loved ones do not want to continue to overstep your boundaries. Ooh, that's a story that we tell ourselves, though, don't we? And might need help to learn how not to do so. Communicating in a fashion that directly states how you feel and what can be done to help the individual or individuals from being a habitual line stepper. Absolutely. And then love that, Glenn. When you were just speaking, Glenn. Love that, Glenn. Understanding our triggers is a great way to regain your voice. If we do not understand why, how can we effectively communicate it to others? Oh, shoot. Keone says, Glenn, that was good. Sitting and evaluating the root cause. When you find the root, you find the solution. True. And then Tyler says, another part of that path is reaching out to a brother to bounce my thoughts off of and get their perspective to ensure I'm not being selfish or unreasonable with my thoughts or actions and not recognizing it myself. I do that all the time. I'm like, yo, am I tripping? Like, I will call somebody like, hey, I need to know if I'm tripping.
But
Am I
Billy,
tripping?
Billy, the best part about the people that you call, do you ever doubt in your mind that if you're tripping, they're not going to tell you? Because it's one thing to call somebody and bounce something off, but he did say brother, so there's a distinction there. But just calling, it goes back to your circle and who you keeping with you. I'm not calling. No, we had a conversation the other day, Billy. We're not dealing with people who are saying, "Oh yeah, F that and F this. Let's go run amok in the town." And nobody's dealing with that. When Bruce is effing up, y'all gonna tell me, and I love that. That's pivotal to growth for real.
It is. If you don't have an accountability circle and all you have is yes men, you don't have to talk to anybody. You can just talk to yourself. You can just talk to yourself because everybody else is going to say yes. So just talk to yourself, or whatever you come up with, the whole squad's down. And then lastly, I have Keone. It says, John, I love the transparency. I'm there too, being raised in the fear of my dad. I still blow up, but it is also key having empathy and compassion with our kids. I actually had a conversation with my oldest son after he was an adult and said, okay, so now that we're through the interview, where did I mess up? This 18-year interview. Help me understand where I got it right and where I got it wrong. And one of the things my son said to me, he was like, Dad, you used to cuss at me a lot. Like, you would be cussing me out. And I felt like, damn, did I do something that bad that, like, you can't even speak to me in a reasonable way? And part of that, John, going back, you're especially your first child, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're just like, yo, I'm trying to keep you alive. The end. I don't know how I'm going to feed you. I don't know how I'm going to shelter you. I don't know how I'm going to keep you from to make you look both ways before you cross the street, but I'm trying to keep you alive. And that is by any toxic means or positive means necessary. So having those conversations and being able to go back and say, you know what, I could have done that better. I'm with my middle son. He actually probably agitates me more than my older son did, but I'm not as I don't cuss him out like that. Trust me, there's some things he's done where he's gotten his butt cussed out. But I can say with us without a shadow of a doubt, there's far fewer times that he's had where I've been cussing at him. Sometimes I just stop and just say, look, I can't even talk to you right now. Like, I'm so disappointed right now that I can't talk to you right now because I can't effectively communicate why I'm disappointed. And for a long time, it was just like, you jumped off the radar. You didn't do what you were supposed to do, or you were cutting up in school or cutting up out in the world. And I was on your helmet. And I, in retrospect, I validated that with the world is going to be hard on you. And I'm not going to make you believe there's this fairy gumdrop land out there that's going to be easy on you. But the reality is as a father, it's also our responsibility to teach our kids love, grace, and understanding. And that if every lesson is a hammer and a nail, they're never going to get those other characteristics from you. Really quick, the question that Keone asked, he said, what happens when you feel like you regain your voice and you try to communicate, but you still get knocked down because you're still misunderstood?
I am going to go first. Now, this might be a Bruce problem, right? And this is something that I'm really, really trying to get through seriously, right? But again, like I said, I'm not a perfect communicator by any. I have work to do on communicating outwardly, and I have work to do on receiving and understanding communication inwardly, right? But I just find it hard for people to misunderstand me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I speak English, you speak English. So what I'm learning is you're not misunderstanding me. You are purposely, and this is the petty part I'm trying to work through. You're purposely not trying to pick up what I'm putting down, right? And that's normally for me in a space. That's normally a spouse and offspring thing, right? That doesn't happen at work. That doesn't happen with my brothers. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I tell my wife that, I tell my kids that, you guys are the only people who say this about me. And I disagree with all kinds of people all the time. So I don't know, for me, in a space of, in terms of the topic of silent suffering and being misunderstood, the people who cause me to suffer silently, they're not misunderstanding me. Because when you lead with communication, especially when I know that I had to get better, like that rage dad shit, we knocked all that out. Now I'm communicating with you guys, and for whatever reason, you're just choosing not to understand what I'm saying. And that's not a misunderstanding. That's something different. You know what I mean? And that drives your boy into the silent suffering. You can talk about.
Yeah. One of the things that my wife and I have recently started using at the recommendation of our therapist is we have a conflict strategy. And again, for me, remember, one of my triggers is conflict when it comes to silent suffering. So one of the things in our conflict strategy is alignment. Often when people are talking about what they think is the same thing, they're talking about different things. And so one of the things that my wife and I have had to do is really like get on the same page before we start the deeper communication. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, you know, we were having this conversation about the dentist, right? For our kids. We're having a conversation about the dentist for our kids. I was talking about our younger son. She was talking about our middle son. And it was like, we weren't able to align. It was like, well, why do we need to do this? Why do we need to do that? It's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Like, when you say the dentist, who are you talking about? And she was like, oh, I'm talking about our middle son. I'm like, I'm talking about our younger son. So let's get on alignment. Who do we want to talk about first? Now we can move forward without that misunderstanding. Because honestly, I think sometimes, Bruce, we tell ourselves the story that they just don't want to understand me. I'm a great communicator. They just don't want to understand me. But the reality is that there's a confusion taking place for one side or the other of that party. Even when I came home one day, my wife, here's how easy this misunderstanding can take place. My wife was taking a bag of I thought was trash out of the household, right? I get to the door, she's like, "Can you help me with this?" I'm thinking she wants me to help her with trash. She wants me to help her with the wedding dress she's pulling out of the car. I'm like, "Help you with what?" She's like, "This." I'm like, "What is this?" And she says, "Never mind, forget it." And me and my avoidance was like, "Okay, fine, never mind." And I walked off. But the miscommunication was there was like three different miscommunications taking place. One, I just got home. I thought you were taking trash out. I'm thinking, well, what trash do you want me to pick up to take out of the house? She has a wedding dress in her hand. She's saying, if I have a wedding dress in my hand, I'm talking about this wedding dress. And on my third miscommunication or out of alignment, I'm like, I seen you pick up that wedding dress by yourself, put that wedding dress in the car by yourself. So I have no concept that it's the wedding dress that you need help with, because you haven't needed help with it twice. So why all of a sudden would you need help with it? So being able to get on alignment, like when we had that conversation, it was like, babe, I wasn't trying to be a jerk about, well, what do you need help with? And I clearly see you with a wedding dress in your hand. I was trying to get in alignment with what did you actually need from me, so I can then make a decision to say, yes, I can help you, or no, I can't help you right now. Like, that's where you get through that misunderstanding. But often we try to shortcut the process by jumping through a bunch of assumptions. That's how I would answer that. Anybody else have a response to that?
Yeah, starting from curious is key. I've been in that space too, where, I'm talking about one thing and my wife is talking about something totally different. And then that's where it starts, and say we circle back and be like, okay, we were talking about two different things. But back to the question is, what happens when you feel like you regain your voice, and you try to communicate, but you still get knocked down because you're still misunderstood. Like for my wife, I kind of call her out in a moment, right? Because sometimes I think she's not even listening to what I'm saying. She's queued up to say no before I even say anything, right? And I can tell her, look, you want this $1,000? No. Wait a minute, what'd you say? Right? And so she's queued up to say no before I even get started. And so part of me not losing my voice is making sure, and it's not, I mean, I don't call her out, but I wouldn't call it that because that seems kind of harsh, but I do point out these nuances that she has that I think interferes with our ability to communicate effectively, right? And so when they pop up, it's like, this is what I'm talking about. Let's talk about this. And she may not acknowledge it in a moment, but I can see the shift in her, say, in future conversations, right? So once I gain my voice, I don't think I'm completely there yet, because I haven't been as intentional as I could be about having some of these conversations. But once I gain my voice, I don't plan to revert and go backwards. I'll continue to move forward and just kind of address these little nuances, smooth those out so we don't come across those going forward.
Love it.
I like that. I like what Brian said, Billy. There, it definitely will take time. Like, even though you regain your voice, it'll take time for the folks to get used to what you're attempting to communicate to them, and the behavior. But for me, I would say that one key component to this communication pathway, you got to be able to draw the line where you're able to say that you're no longer participating in this and you're able to walk away. Because if you can't walk away, then you won't be able to be yourself. You won't be able to have your voice, because you're just constantly, I mean, I understand we're trying to keep the peace, but again, going back to one of the earlier points that Billy, you mentioned, that inner peace. You got to be. It has to be all there, because if it's not all there, it's gonna the same sequence is gonna happen all over again. I mean, it may not be right now, but 5, 10, 15 years later down the road, the explosion is going to be even way bigger.
I agree with that. Really quick, we got to get ready to wrap. Oh, look, brother Tim made it in. He says, "Oh man, I missed the email. Looking forward to rejoining the circle next time." But Tyler, he says, honestly, that's when everyone gets cussed out. It's not good. I need to work on that, but it's true. Yes, I mean, I tell people I'm a pretty articulate person, but articulation works on both sides of that spectrum for me. I know how to blend, mix, and match, and agitate and verbalize curse words. Verbalize, not verbalize, verbalize. They become action words.
I like what you brought. I like what you brought when you talked about the alignment. Mm-hmm. I know I'm the only male in my house, and we think a certain way. And just hearing you say what you said in terms of the misunderstanding, I can count. I don't even have enough digits to count how many times someone in my house and I had a situation to where it was a minor misunderstanding and it turned into some bullshit. So I am going to take with me your alignment strat. Let's make sure we're both talking about the same thing before we continue this conversation. Thank you for dropping that. Those were bars.
Yeah, that was a $125 session. You're welcome.
Bro, you said that was the therapist? The therapist, I said thank you. I needed that
one. So I'm gonna cut it there because we gotta wrap before we get to like 9 o'clock out here, and then it's 10 o'clock out and somewhere else. But I want to take this time to give everybody an opportunity to give their closing thoughts when it comes to silent suffering before I give the key takeaways from tonight. Who wants to go first? 1, 2, 3, not me.
All right, I'll do it. So a lot of gems were dropped tonight by all of you gentlemen, and I'd like to start by saying thank you. I appreciate it. I've been waiting. I don't even know how long. Why I feel like it's been like 3 months since we did this. I know it ain't been that long, but I'm glad this is back. Let's keep this up. But my takeaway from tonight, a couple things: accountability, self-accountability, recognizing what's wrong with you, being true to who you are and what you stand for, what you want, and then communication, and its proper use when dealing with whichever party made you revert to your cycle of silent suffering. But more importantly, I think that what I heard from you gentlemen is communication to the people who love you, who, sometimes, and this is what 2023 and tonight, it's like, cool. Sometimes the person that you need to communicate to, like your spouse or your loved one or whatever, isn't the only person that can help you out of the silent suffering, right? So, and then with that, if I reach out to a loved one and they help me through the silent suffering, that might also, be the path to me reclaiming my voice and going back and having a productive conversation. Like this is secular. I'm not saying it right, but it's a cycle, and it starts with being accountable with yourself, communicating with your loved ones, and then just knowing who you are. And so if I can leave one more message, if anybody is out there hurting, not themselves, whatever the case may be. And so, another thing, guys, therapy isn't just for when you're not doing well, right? Like, that's another misconception, bro. Like, talking to somebody when you're doing good is good too. It feels really good. When you check in with the therapist, like, what's going on this week? Absolutely nothing. I'm great. How about that? But just reach out, talk to somebody, keep good people in your circle. That's my take.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. Some of the key takeaways I took, I mean, it's always, the topics here are always good, right? These are topics that outside of this men's circle, I probably wouldn't be having these discussions, right? Like Bruce, I live with a house full of women, my boys are gone. And I'm not saying my ladies are a challenge, but it's different, right? It requires me to move a different way in my space versus if I was in a space with my boys. But some of the key things I took away from here for myself is being intentional about, I know there is a need to isolate. It doesn't have to, I don't have to isolate and suffer, right? To Glenn's point, I can use that time to sit with myself but be productive in that space and come out of that space intentionally. Like, okay, I'm gonna come out of this space with the intent to, address X, Y, and Z, or have a conversation, a productive conversation about X, Y, and Z. I don't think I do that enough. I think as we have a tendency to go because the expectation is that what we do, right? Whether it's work, activities, you name it, we're always in the middle of something. And often throughout my life, I haven't stopped to just sit with myself and be intentional about resolving some of the issues, the taboo issues or whatnot that as a man, I don't have an opportunity to address or even think about often. So those are the two things that I walk away with. It's just being intentional and just sitting with myself and being productive in that space and coming out of that space with the intent to get better and not suffer in silence.
Love it.
Yeah, I would I echo really everything that Brian and Bruce said. On the other side of that, the chat, I appreciate everybody that was in the chat tonight with the engagement. I will say there's a lot of people, men specifically, who have great souls but suffer in silence, right? So I'll just say with that, reach out. Here you have a platform where you can come virtually and interact and, have a voice, but also receive, gems or nuggets, or more specifically, practical principles of what you can go and try and execute, right? And you can circle back in a week and a half and come back and say, hey, I tried this, and what other thoughts or advice do you guys have? But it's always a pleasure being on this platform, to sit alongside you men, and also our virtual men as well. So grateful for the opportunity, Ro. Thank you guys.
Yeah, well, real quick, my takeaway is to continue communicating, continue to be yourself. And one thing I really want to stress is, Billy, I would say, please continue creating these safe spaces for all of us here. I've been looking around. I've been looking around, talking to many men, mainly Asian American men, and I don't think there's even a space like this, Billy. So thank you so much for opening this up to all of us here, especially to me, because I was suffering in silence. So just to talk with among other men, it shows that I'm not alone on this. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. So that's really good to know. So and this is I'm not paying someone. I went to a few therapists and I paid them big money, but I hopefully you don't charge 125, 150 here. So but to be again, please continue to create these safe spaces. I talk with I talk with many folks. I just don't. I believe I see them suffering because I know how it looks like, but they just don't. They won't open up. They won't be vulnerable. So it's going to take time. It's going to take time. But
John, I got a challenge. I'm sorry to cut y'all off. Bruce, here he is. John, I got a challenge for you. And I got a challenge for all of us, everybody listening.
Yeah.
You said that you talk to and you see other Asian American men, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Share this video with 3 of them. Everybody share this video with 3 men that already ain't watching the video, ain't hip to it. Get the word out. Because when Glenn speaks of interaction in the chat, that's just come from sharing the link. So if you know this is helping you, Everybody share the link with 3 of your people.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. No, that was one of the things this year that I became more committed to, because I'm not a likes, follow, share person. I don't care about that stuff. Honestly, I'm just being honest. I don't. And it's, if I did, I wouldn't be doing this type of content. Like, that's the reality. I'd be doing the clickbait content. But this year, this season, not this year, this season, I am more committed to making sure I'm sending out invites to men saying, hey, this is what we're talking about next week. You might want to tune in. This is what we're talking about next week. You might want to tune in. And just to put it out there, so there's an opportunity, so nobody can ever say, oh, Ro, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know these types of conversations were taking place. Nah, these conversations were taking place, and I started telling you that these conversations were taking place. And there's some historical archive conversations that took place that you can go and get some information from as well. So I am being more, for me personally, being more intentional about letting men know, hey, we got this space for us. We have a safe space. You're welcome to come and be a part of it. I love the interaction from the chat. I want to take a moment to appreciate you, John, because it's easier to sometimes clam up and say nothing when you know what you're going to say is going to strike an emotion within yourself that you can't shadow, you can't hide, you can't mask. So I want to really take the time and a moment to appreciate you, because this is what vulnerable and honest and transparent conversation and communication looks like. It doesn't look like, well, I still got to be a man while I'm in the men's, or it doesn't look like that. And for all of you were actually at the conference, and there was a situation that I had where I was emotional, and it was like, it didn't matter if I thought about my happiest memory before I went into this memory. It was just an emotional memory, and it brought emotion out of me. And it's okay that emotion comes out of you when you're going back to Bruce's point, when you're surrounding yourself with the right circle. When you're surrounding yourself with the wrong circle and emotion comes out, then people are like, oh, you over there, big crybaby, whatever it may be, all these different things. But when you're surrounded by the right people want to see you win, period. And if that means you being emotional and vulnerable, we still want to see you win, period. And if that comes with that emotion and vulnerability, then great, that comes with that. So I wanted to just tip my hat to you for that, because I definitely appreciate you for that, John. So as always, I'm constantly taking notes. We got to 9 different takeaways for today when it comes to silent suffering. So I'm going to go over these at brevity, but takeaway number 1 was stop allowing silent suffering to normalize. It should say to be normalized. But Brian, you had said that you didn't realize that somehow in the course of the training program or the conditioning, that silent suffering became a normalized event. So when it's normalized, it's normal. It's not abuse, right? Me silently suffering on the inside is not abuse, because that's normal. That's what we do every day. Me not silently suffering and communicating, that's abnormal. So now that's abuse. That's abnormal. So that was the first takeaway that I pulled from tonight's conversation. Second one was silent suffering can look very normal on the outside. Bruce, that goes back to that house with dry rot. Yeah, it looks like it's inhabitable, but for some reason there's an eviction sign or an uninhabitable sign on the door saying, hey, nobody can live in this building because it's not safe. So if you find more often than not, when you're looking in the mirror and you feel like it looks normal, but you know what's going on the inside is chaotic, I'm going to go back to what Bruce said. Pick up the phone and call one of your brothers. Pick up the phone, call one of your accountability partners. Pick up the phone and call one of your loved ones. I actually had an aunt who committed suicide last year. And I wish she would have picked up the phone and called me. Wish she would have picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, this is what I'm going through. I'm trying to find love and I don't seem to be able to find it. And it seems like nobody loves me. Nah, auntie, I love you. But we didn't have that conversation. She didn't pick up the phone to anybody. And so now she's gone. So silent suffering can look very normal on the outside, but you know what's going on the inside of your mind. Take time to pick up the phone and call a loved one. Practice using your voice. It's important. John, you were talking about that when you go so long without using your voice, it's almost like when I was a kid, I knew how to play the piano by ear, right? Could listen to a song about 3 or 4 times, start playing it on the piano. I stopped doing that. I stopped practicing that. Now I can listen to a song 85 times and I still can't play it on the piano. It don't matter how many times I listen to it. I'm like, I don't even know where the key sound is at or any of that. And because I'm so far out of practice, it is going to be extremely difficult for me to get back to the space where I was previously. So practice using your voice because it's an important thing for you to use when it comes to setting boundaries. It's an important thing for you to use when it comes to setting expectations for what you are desiring from the people that you love and you care about, that you want to keep involved in your life. Key takeaway number 4 is stop letting people off the hook. Woo! You know what, Cousin Brian, that resonated with me so strong because even when I tell my wife, she'll tell me all the time, well, you always say we'll talk about it later, then we never talk about it, right? That is in essence letting her off the hook for the thing that triggered me. And then no wonder she does it again and I'm triggered again. And I'll say, we'll talk about it later. And I don't. And so each time you say you're going to talk about it later, each time you don't communicate, you are essentially letting people off the hook on putting you into a cycle of silent suffering. So I really like that particular takeaway. Key takeaway number 5, eliminate the guesswork. Eliminate the guesswork. John, you said that. Just like literally eliminate the guesswork. If you're silently suffering, everybody's assuming. It's almost like when they say women want men to be mind readers, right? They want men to be mind readers. What's wrong? Nothing. It seems like something wrong. I'm fine. Now I got to try to read your mind to figure out what the heck is actually wrong with you, because clearly something is wrong, right? It's no different when you're silently suffering. When you're silently suffering, the other person has no idea, and all they can glean are assumptions. Well, maybe he's mad because we didn't have sex last night. Maybe he's mad because, I blew out a tire, or the tire was flat and I didn't tell him. Like, there's all these different assumptions they have to make. You can 100% eliminate the guesswork by simply communicating before you go into isolation and communicating when you come out of isolation. One of the things that I've been doing this year already has been, if there's something that I feel like I need to take a moment to, before I open my mouth and say something, I take 10 seconds. I count to 10. If there's something that I want to do immediately and I want to avoid procrastinating it, I count down from 5. And before I hit 1, I need to start. Like that happened this morning. I didn't want to get up. The alarm went off at 5 o'clock this morning. I was like 5, 4, 3. And before I got to 1, my feet were on the ground. I was up and getting ready to start brushing my teeth. So eliminate that guesswork, communicate before you go on isolation so that there's no guessing taking place while you're in isolation. Communicate when you come out of isolation. And that's just accountability. Key takeaway number 6, develop a quality circle and then reach out. Don't matter if your circle is high quality if you never reach out to them, to be honest. Like you could have the world's brightest, sharpest minds at your disposal. But if you never pick up the phone, if you never pick up the bat phone, guess what? Guess who ain't coming? Batman. So that is something, Glenn, that you said, is that you have a circle. And then you also know that you can reach out to that circle and you know they're going to pick up the phone when you call. Key takeaway number 7 is sometimes you need to re-engage the audience. So Bruce, though it was not in ourselves, there were two moments in this part of our conversation where you said you lost the ear of your children, right? Sometimes we lose our audience ears. We lose our audience's ears. And in that, we have to figure out how to re-engage with that audience. And immediately, I think John came in right after you, Bruce. And he said, take a moment to apologize. Take a moment to apologize. Though it may not immediately regain the ear, it will plant the seed. I at least believe it'll begin to plant the seed, whether it's with your children, with your loved one, with somebody you offended. It will plant the seed that, you know what, maybe they actually didn't mean to shut me out. Maybe they actually didn't mean to isolate themselves from me, but they were just trying to solve a problem. But if you take the moment to say, hey, I apologize for isolating myself. I apologize for leaving you in the dark while I was trying to figure out what was going on with me. I'll work to improve upon that. That helps to re-engage that audience. So those were two key takeaways that were kind of bam, bam, and they fed off of each other for me. And then finally, key takeaway number 9 is it comes down to communication. Figure out how to align to speak your truth. And that's something for me. When it comes to communicating, the purpose of communication is understanding. It's not really about being right or wrong. The purpose of communication is understanding. If you want to be right or wrong, you don't even have to communicate with anybody to be right or wrong. You can just be by yourself and find out if you're right or wrong. But if you go into communication with that understanding, that communication, the purpose of it is understanding, will work to get to understanding. Your objective will be understanding. Your objective will not be who's right. Your objective won't be, see, I told you so. Your objective won't be, you're always coming down on me. Your objective will simply be to be in alignment and make sure that the funnel of communication is as clear as it can possibly be. So that was key takeaway number 9 that we got from tonight. Whew, that was 9 of them. But man, I can't tell you guys how happy I am to be back here on the Men's Circle on the first row. It has been an amazing journey, and I'm just looking forward to like 2024. I'm looking forward to the next conference. I'm looking forward to more conversations. I'm looking forward to so much for the Men's Circle this year. It's going to be a wild, wild ride. Really quick, I'm going to bring in from the chat because I just seen this. Keone says his final thoughts are communication, alignment. If you're suffering, find a brother that can be transparent with. Don't keep it in. Keeping it in could lead to bitterness, could lead to deep isolation and depression. Appreciate that on that as well. But I'm just really, like I said, I'm looking forward to what we have here with this group of men. It's a very special group of men. I can tell my weeks are different when I have the Men's Circle versus 2 months without the Men's Circle. I could tell you there's a difference. Fortunately, to Glenn's point, I have a network of men that I can reach out and call in between sessions. So if I do need to call somebody, I can call somebody. But man, just a phenomenal segment tonight. There's probably so many more branches we could go down, but I feel like we did this topic justice this evening. Other than that, I did ask you, Glenn, if you want, go ahead and come off. Tell us about when the L3 perspective is coming back, because that's another wonderful leadership joint that I would love for the viewers to view into.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm actually super excited. We took a small break to focus on family, focus on some other business ventures and projects and different things. But we actually started recording back in November, and we'll be releasing season 2. We have a meeting tomorrow to firm out the date, but it'll be within the next 2 to 3 weeks for sure. But the L3 Perspective, our podcast that I do with a friend of mine, Cameron, he's my co-host. The L3 Perspective, we talk about life, love, and leadership topics. And really, again, going back to what I said, coming into this platform, we have one ultimate goal is just to provide value to folks. But those 3 topics are essential in everyday life. Definitely follow us on Instagram and YouTube. You can check out season 1. We had a lot of great guests. I think we pushed out 37 episodes in season 1. So season 2, we've been able to interview some very thorough individuals already. So looking forward to just continue on and building off of what we executed in season 1.
Appreciate you, brother. Other than that, that's all I got for tonight. The next time you'll see us live on the first row, I almost said Wednesday word, on the first row, will be 2 weeks from today. Plus 14 is the 23rd of January. But other than that, as always, if you like this video, share it. If you share this video, like it. We always are happy to engage with you in the live chat if you're watching live. If you're watching via the replay, happy to engage with you in the chat until we get to the next session. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.